Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another lecture of our AI for Research Israel community series. We're counting today 188 days since the war started and 133 Israeli hostages that we pray that will come back home soon. We are honored to have Dr. Lefteris Teperikidis from Greece with us today. Dr. Teperikidis will introduce himself and will present his insights on systematic review with AI in today's lecture. But let me begin with asking Yael, who founded the AI for RI community, to greet us. Yael, please.
Hi, so first, I really want to express my gratitude to Dr. Teperikidis for being here with us tonight to share his insights on AI for systematic reviews. Thank you for your time and for your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible community of researchers who have come together to study AI and explore new methods and tools to achieve better results. Across many research disciplines, we're here it's a very community. And we are pleased lately to see an interest group forming within the community and establishing separate channels. We will maintain transparency regarding the work being done by these subgroups for the benefits of everyone in the community, and we encourage other interest groups to raise. We are here, Ronit and I and other admins, we are here to help you to make the right connections. And with no further ado, Dr. Teperikidis, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much.
Just let me mention that we will have a 45 minutes lecture, and we will allow people to ask questions for another 45 minutes. So please write down your questions. You can write them in chat or in your notes. So yeah, Dr. Teperikidis, please.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure. I love talking about systematic reviews. I love talking about artificial intelligence. So this is a great combination for me. Give me 1 second, please. All right. Okay, so why am I talking to you today? I don't particularly enjoy introducing myself. Renee was very kind and asked if she would introduce me, but I pretty much painted a picture of my relationship with artificial intelligence over the past year and a half or so. Last summer, I published a systematic review that was almost fully generated by Chat GPT. I say almost because we couldn't get it to perform a risk of bias assessment at the time, but it was published last summer. It was actually performed last March with version 3.5 of Chat GPT. So we had some issues there. We now solved them. This is a letter to the editor based on the same publication. This actually came out 3 days ago. It's a preprint. I was asked by a professor of pharmacology here at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki to develop a method for pharmacovigilance using AI. And that's exactly what that is. It's a way to quickly identify and summarize phase 4 studies, at least the ones that do report some kind of adverse effect. We were just talking about this. This is a tutorial on how to use ChatGPT to perform a systematic review. This was accepted for publication about 3 weeks ago, so hopefully anytime now we'll have the actual report out. And this is a book I wrote. It sounds fancy when you write a book, but honestly, it was done over the weekend, and that's the kind of assistance you can get from using ChatGPT. So there's more to come, but right now these are essentially some of the most interesting stuff that I've been doing. So why use AI? Well, obviously speed. I will say quality and reproducibility as well. Reproducibility is an issue at the moment. There's various reasons for that, but I do believe that we're not that far away from the next models that are going to easily take care of this. And there are some elements that are new, at least in the world of systematic reviews, and that will be evident very shortly. And also the quality. I want to really briefly touch upon this. There is a study published in PLOS from 2020. They actually took about 330,000 decisions made from published systematic reviews. These decisions were made from 86, if I remember correctly, human reviewers, and they recorded an error rate of about 10%. When we screen for systematic reviews, mistakes are always being made. We're humans, it's only reasonable. I think one of the most important things that AI will introduce is a significant improvement in the quality of the reports that we actually write. Now, this is my silly way of demonstrating the type of thinking anyone should have when thinking about what type of prompt I should write. Writers are the best suited for this. And when I say writers, what do I mean? Do I mean science fiction writers, academic manuscript writers, or whatever? I think the best type of writer to describe the mindset, you know, these people that write the instruction manuals, you buy like a vacuum cleaner and it comes with like 200 pages of instructions. That's the type of thinking we need to have when writing prompts. Essentially, we need to break everything down, give as much information as we can, and always have the 4 basic things in mind. A, the token limits of the model we are using, and B, the processing capacity. These have to do with the actual model that we're using. I will speak about Chat GPT today, but this is applicable to any LLM, really. And the 2 things that we always have to keep in mind in terms of what do I do, how do I write a prompt? First thing, context. Second thing, restrictions. These things are going to make a lot more sense in a minute. I think this is the most important slide of the presentation, right? So every time I begin writing a prompt, there's 3 variables to take into consideration. What's my token limit per interaction? What's my context window for the entire chat? And what's my processing capacity? Now, I'll be using Chat GPT, the version 4, the Teams Pro version, that has a limit of 8,000 tokens per interaction and a 32,000 token limit for the whole chat. That is, as far as I know, the biggest available context window at the moment. The processing capacity is essentially the number of tasks that the tool can perform in one interaction. It's not that clearly defined, and the only thing I can say about this is it only comes with experience, right? The more you interact with the tool, the more you're going to be able to tell, yes, it can perform this task. You can ask it to perform these 2 tasks, but maybe 3 tasks is going to be too much. It's a combination of the number of tasks and the complexity of each task. So in practice, I always begin by providing context. What do I mean by context? Well, if I'm doing a systematic review, first thing I'm going to say is I'm performing systematic review. I will provide context and I will provide as much background information simply because I do not want the model to start trying to figure things out for me. If it starts trying to figure things out, that takes away from valuable processing capacity that I would like to preserve. And there's always a chance that the model will make a mistake when trying to figure out what it is that the background information is. The second thing that I always have in mind in practice, provide restrictions and guidance. Again, should make a lot more sense in a minute. Now, just in case you're, these are the steps of a systematic review, but let's get into practice, right? So it was a thing, I think, early March last year, I had broken down the steps of a systematic review. I had tried them out individually on Chat GPT at the time. I called up a friend of mine who is a professor of cardiology. I said, listen, give me a question. I want to play with Chat GPT. And the question was, is there a correlation between the use of proton pump inhibitors? These are, for those not familiar, they're one of the most popular classes of medications for stomach issues. And is there a correlation between the use of proton pump PPIs and major adverse cardiovascular events? Essentially, what that means is heart attacks and stroke. Does the use of these drugs have any type of adverse effect on the cardiovascular system? The first step of a systematic review, obviously, is formulating the question. The second step is the search strategy. So beginning with prompt number one, what do I want to set up my search string? What I need is an exhaustive list of all the different proton pump inhibitors that are available, right? I've highlighted the word exhaustive. I find that it does have a very beneficial effect every time I'm trying to generate any type of list. If you try any other synonym, I find it doesn't work as well. So try it out. You'll find that it works quite well. Up to 20 items on your list. If the list you're asking it to generate has more than 20 items, it will still claim it's an exhaustive list and still give you 20. So even if it claims it's an exhaustive list, refine, reiterate, ask it again, is this list exhaustive? If it is, it will tell you so. If it's not, it will continue to generate more items. And this is, to date, the best way I have figured out when I'm trying to generate long lists, especially for generating search strategies on PubMed that require a lot of synonyms and so on and so forth. Now, the second sentence is the restriction or rule I was telling you about. If I don't write, no other output is required, it's going to start telling me, well, PPIs are class of medications that work on the sodium, potassium ATPase, the hydrogen potassium ATPase, and inhibit hydrogen secretion in the stomach. They're being used for peptic ulcer disease and GERD and so on and so forth. That's information I don't want. That's why I'm putting the restriction. I am preserving both tokens and processing capacity, directing it exactly where I want, which is the task at hand. Now, for prompt number two, the second part is, please provide me with a definition of MACE, major adverse cardiovascular events. There is a valid and widely accepted definition for this. And the third part is, let me just move this here. I'm performing a systematic review that investigates the potential association between PPI use and the risk of MACE. This is context. I don't want it to try and figure out that I'm doing a systematic review and that's what I'm asking for a PubMed search string. I want to give it context. As soon as I give it the context, it doesn't have to figure anything out. It can focus on the task that I'm asking it to perform, right? So what am I asking it? I'm asking it, can you please generate a PubMed search string? Once it generates the search string, and the first two, the broader and narrower thing, is something that has various applications, not just for systematic reviews. I used to work for a consultancy in the UK up until sometime last year. every time we had a search or a question to answer that we knew there was going to be very few reports available, if any, so difficult topics to investigate. If you have a search string that you wrote yourself or you generated with Chat GPT or whatever the case might be, and you're getting very few results, or you're not getting any results or irrelevant results, drop the search strategy into Chat GPT and just say broader, please. It will automatically generate broader search terms that will increase the number of results. They may not be as targeted and as relevant, but when you're looking for something that is hard to find, that is a very, very good way to expand your search and potentially find something relevant if that is out there. Narrower, you run a PubMed search and you get 50,000 results. All you have to do is drop the search string and say narrower. Now, for those that are more advanced with the way PubMed search strategies work, you can easily instruct it to include mesh terms, TABs, wildcards, phrase index terms, free terms, any essentially search function that is available to PubMed. ChatGPT seems to be very efficient in generating such search strategies. Now, once you've generated your search strategy and you executed it on PubMed and you got X number of results, third part of a systematic review is screening by title and abstract. And this is my prompt. Again, you're an expert systematic reviewer. A lot of people like this type of assigning a role to ChatGPT. It's useful in the sense that you don't have to write that much. You just write a few words and automatically you provide context instead of saying, I am performing a systematic review that I need your help with, and so on and so forth. Any way you choose to provide context is fine, as long as you provide context. And then I moved to actually provide the task at hand, right? So your task is to analyze the provided text of 10 titles and abstracts and determine their relevance to the PICOS criteria of my systematic review. Here are the PICOS elements, right? So in terms of population, I'm only interested in adults. Intervention, I'm only interested in any type of PPI, proton pump inhibitors. Control, I really don't care. Any type of control is acceptable. What I'm looking for in terms of outcomes is the rate of major adverse cardiovascular events or any of its components, namely myocardial infarction, stroke, or cardiovascular death. That is the definition of MACE. And I could easily say the rate of major adverse cardiovascular events, period, but I am actually naming the specific events, MI, stroke, and so on and so forth, that I wanted to look for. I am trying to direct it as much as possible. Now, for this specific systematic review, we only went for meta-analyses in terms of study type. Essentially, it's an umbrella review. The only reason behind this is because I wanted to keep the numbers to a manageable level. I didn't want to screen 5,000 articles. I wanted to screen potentially in the hundreds, and that's how it actually ended up. And then I continue to give it more direction. Your first task is to familiarize yourself with the structure of the citations in the provided text. The way I work, I'll run the search, I'll download the NBIB file and upload it into EndNote. I work with EndNote. What I'm going to show you can easily work with any reference manager or with a TXT file that you can download from directly from PubMed. The citations, the way I can copy them from EndNote, come in a specific structure. The citations begin with the author list, followed by the year of publication, followed by the title, followed by the citation information, followed by the abstract. Please note that some citations may be missing an abstract, right? So I'm feeding everything that I can in a plate to it. I don't want it to figure these things out. It can figure these things out and it can do it quite effectively, but that's going to be taking up processing power away from the actual task. If I can provide the background and the context, then more processing power will be reserved for executing the actual task. Now, making a note, it's likely that there will be studies that investigate the co-administration of PPIs with antiplatelets in the context of MACE. These studies must be excluded. This is part of my exclusion criteria. I did my preliminary searches, and I did realize that there were a lot of studies out there that investigated PPIs with antiplatelets. There's a whole theory. The clopidogrel, the main antiplatelet, is a prodrug, needs the isoenzymes in the liver to get converted into its active form. PPIs are known inhibitors of these liver enzymes. Therefore, they could inhibit the activation of the drug. Therefore, you could have this interaction. That was not what I was interested in. I was interested in PPI monotherapy, and especially not co-administration with antiplatelets. So essentially, I'm specifying that. And the required output is a list of each study title. So I need some kind of identifier for each study. I can use the title, I can use the author names, I can use anything really that I choose to use, followed by your determination of relevance, followed by a brief justification for your decision. Here are the abstracts. Please note the 3 hashtags. They're very useful. Every time you want to differentiate between your instruction and text that is to be processed by the model, use the 3 hashtags. That tells the model that this is where your command stops and the text that needs processing begins. When you finish pasting the text that needs processing, you can use the 3 hashtags again if you want to include further direction. So this is a very efficient way to make this distinction for the model. The next part is data extraction. Again, I begin with you're an expert systematic reviewer. Please analyze the attached document of a meta-analysis. Your task is to extract the following information. There are 2 traps here. First of all, I'm asking for the number of patients. Those of us in the world of systematic reviews will tell you the number of patients is not always reported. In a systematic review, the number of studies will always be reported, but not necessarily. It's at the discretion of the authors, really. So I've highlighted the if available. The reason for that being, these models, I'm sure you've all heard the word hallucinations. If it doesn't find the information, it can do something that it refers to as extrapolate, deduce, imagine, or hallucinate, or whatever. So this, including the number of patients in my required output, this is knowingly on my end a trap that could lead to a hallucination. And then the other thing that needs to be specified, these models are very good at providing summaries. They can summarize a very long piece of text quite efficiently. The way to do this is remove all the numbers. So let's say I have some kind of event that comes with its values, it's 95% confidence interval, it's p-values and all of that information that we need to retain. If you don't specifically instruct the model to include all relevant numerical values, it will not. Every time you want the numbers extracted, you have to say, I want the numbers extracted. Essentially, that's what that means. And I'm making some rules. If any of the requested information is not available, please omit that from your response completely. Do not attempt to extrapolate or deduce this information. This is me taking.
Sorry, I muted you. I'm sorry because I hear someone
that's okay.
By mistake. Sorry.
That's all right. So again, another precautionary measure. If the number of patients is not stated, just do not generate the number of patients, right? Or say it wasn't stated. And then another thing that you should always pretty much use as a rule whenever you're uploading a PDF, make sure to scan the entire document, including all tables and figures before you generate your response. I find that most of the time, the model will look into a PDF. As soon as it finds a relevant answer, it will stop scanning the PDF and generate an answer. However, you will not always find an answer in one place in a report. There could be a different part of an answer or relevant information in more than one location in a report. That's why you always have to instruct it to scan the entire document before you actually generate your response. It can read tables, it can read figures. If you don't do that, there is a chance you're going to get an incomplete response. Now, the next part, please use your previous response to generate a data extraction table. Again, this is me, and in my experience, I can ask it to extract this information and generate a table, or the data extraction table that we always use in systematic reviews, in one go or attempt or interaction. I like to do it in 2 steps. I find it's much more efficient this way. So essentially, this prompt is saying, please generate a table for me using the information you extracted in the previous step. Now, the last step before writing the actual final report is the risk of bias assessment. If you're not that familiar with risk of bias assessments, you can upload a PDF and ask Chat GPT, please tell me which tool is the most appropriate to use. However, I find it to be much more useful in executing the actual risk of bias assessments themselves. The way that I do this now, and like I said earlier, using ChatGPT version 3.5, I couldn't get it to do this reliably, but with version 4, this works like a charm. Every risk of bias assessment tool comes with a guidance document. All you have to do is upload the document and ask ChatGPT to convert the guidance document into prompts that you can use for any report. For the example that we're doing right now, the appropriate tool to use is called Amstar 2.0. It's the most popular for assessing the quality of systematic reviews. Amstar 2.0 has 16 different domains, 16 different assessments that need to be made. This is the prompt that I use for domain 1. I uploaded the Amstar 2.0 guidance document. I said, give me a prompt that evaluates step 1, domain 1. And the only thing that I actually added was, again, the same rule: make sure to scan the entire document, including all tables and figures, before you generate your response. And then last but not least, we usually do study summaries for each of the included studies in a systematic review. So you are now an expert medical writer. The task at hand is, please reward the provided text of a meta-analysis to a narrative style text by converting the bullet points into a summary paragraph. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it this output with the bullet points that I've already used to generate my table, and I'll show these all in a minute. I'm actually going to use the same output to generate a nice paragraph of a study, of each study. And then the rest of it is rules and restrictions. Please avoid using metaphorical language, storytelling elements, or subjective descriptions. These models, they do have a tendency to make it sound like you're Shakespeare or something like that while writing a scientific report. We don't want that, so we have to instruct it to stay away from that. Instead, the focus should be on clearly detailing the study's objectives, design, methods, and results. The language should reflect the formal tone typically found in scientific papers or academic journals, with an emphasis on clarity, conciseness, and objectivity. That is clear direction on the writing style. Again, rules: make sure to include all relevant numerical values. And again, if the requested information is not available in the provided text, you must exclude that from your response, and so on and so forth. Now, the last thing I want to say, I have tried this. It does take a lot of trial and error. It's not going to work. If it works the first time you try it out, good for you. But if it doesn't, don't get disappointed. It does. We're scientists. We're very, very used to trial and error and experimentation. So please, use that attitude. there isn't such a thing as a perfect prompt. Do not spend 5 hours trying to write a prompt. Write a prompt, see the output, use the output to guide you on how to improve your prompt, repeat the process as many times as needed. I still don't have one prompt that is perfect, but the most important thing is quality control. After you cross-check everything that Chat GPT generates enough times, you can begin to trust the type of tasks that you don't have to cross-check. Until that happens, cross-check everything. That is the only way we can actually guarantee the content that we create. I know it kind of defeats the purpose, and I know QCing is a very taxing and difficult process that I personally don't enjoy particularly. Nevertheless, it's very, very important. So I cannot stress it enough. There are tasks that I've performed by now literally thousands of times. I've cross-checked thousands of times, and I now trust the machine, so I don't check anymore. I still check, but not 100% of the time. So you do begin to build a relationship of trust with the model, but the only way you can build trust is if you cross-check again and again and again until you build that that trust. So that's it. Now let's go to Chat GPT and put these prompts into action. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this sentence without my restriction, just to give you an idea of what the difference is. So now without the restriction, it's going to start giving me background information that I really don't want. Giving me different brand names, different indications. Again, this is information not relevant to what I'm doing. And while it's not really that important for this particular task, when you're actually pushing the limit close to the limit, the token limit and the processing power limit, this type of thing can actually be a lifesaver. Now, with the restriction, all I get, hopefully, is a list of 6 proton pump inhibitors. That's it. Now I can move on to my next step. Essentially, what I'm doing now is I'm building my search strategy, right? Oh, this keeps happening. Now it's going to give me a definition of MACE. Again, I want... All right, so the way that they define this is non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke, and cardiovascular death. They say non-fatal because all the fatal stuff are included in cardiovascular death. However, if you remember in my prompt, I did not say non-fatal, and the reason for that is nobody reports non-fatal MIs, everybody reports MIs. I don't want to confuse the model. I want it to be able to perform the task at hand and not have to figure out every single time that non-fatal MI is the same as MI. So essentially, everything that you can pre-process for the model should be done. Now, 4 and 5 are not part of the most widely acceptable definition. The most widely acceptable definition is this. These are highly relevant, so I don't mind having them here, so I'll leave it at that. If I didn't like this, I would come here and say, please remove items 4 and 5 from your previous response, and that's it. And now to the last part where we actually generate the search string. All right. First things first. Is this? Let's inspect. It's got proton pump inhibitors, entitled and abstract, PPIs, all right. Then the individual agents and the different keywords related to major adverse cardiovascular events. It works. There's probably a mesh term for PPIs or a mesh term for MACE or something like that. This is not, it needs more iterations before you can say this is the perfect search string, but for illustrative purposes, this is going to work just fine for now. Sometimes you might get this. If you get the error message, all you have to do is go back here and say, I got this error message, please fix. And then again, my 3 hashtags to differentiate. All right, now it gave us 46. I'll go back. Essentially, you need to inspect what it did. It did something wrong here, but I'm really pressed for time. So you would need another iteration with this just to make sure that it ends up giving you the appropriate search string. Now I'm going to do something I hate doing, which is click on these filters. I know if you have enough experience with this, these are not necessarily reliable. But for the purposes of, again, of a demonstration, should be fine. Now, the way I do this, save the NBIB file and import it into EndNote. Now, I'm going to go to my second prompt. And knowing my context window is essentially 8,000 tokens, it doesn't take that much calculations to figure out that I can do 10 abstracts at a time. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There we go. Now, while this is doing this, the way I usually work is I will open 10 different tabs here, and I will repeat the process with 10 different batches of 10 abstracts, and I can process 100 abstracts at a time. If you look at this, it's giving me the authors. Did I ask for the authors or did I ask for the study title? Which is already one of the issues that I told you about in terms of reproducibility. I'm asking for a study title. It's giving me the author names. Nevertheless, I'll take it. It's telling me it's irrelevant and it's giving me a justification. It's talking about DAPT. I specifically asked it not to include antiplatelets. DAPT is dual antiplatelet therapy, so it's clearly irrelevant. Now, what I will do is I will take this and copy it into my document. And that way, I have a record of all the studies I included or excluded, along with a justification. Now, obviously, I would have to read these. And yes, I do read these every time. And now it's telling us that the relevant studies are these. So it's actually giving us relevant studies. Now let's take a look at, let's say, for example, bachelor. Right? Is it in fact relevant? Risk of adverse cardiovascular events with proton pump inhibitors independent of clopidogrel. So this sounds like it's highly relevant, right? So essentially, my screening, what I will do, I will make a group of included studies here. And I will drop bachelor here. I will repeat the process as many times until I finish all my 62 references for this example. Now let's get this bachelor study really quick. Okay. Just pretend that you won't see what I'm about to do, please. And once you've screened and identified all the relevant studies, you can upload the relevant studies and go to the next prompt. Let's do some data extraction. Takes a minute because it's actually scanning, and now it's giving us exactly what we requested. It's giving me 447,000 patients. Now, again, I am afraid of hallucinations for this, so I will cross-check. Involving 447,408 participants. So yes, this is correct. Now I got my data extraction form. Let's convert this into a table. Keep doing this. Anyone who's done a data extraction table will tell you this takes a much longer time than this. Now, the way I'll do this is go back to my document and let's paste this table. And let's go to this. And then fit window, and let's make it a little prettier. Now I will repeat the same process for every article I include, and then all I have to do is just add rows to this table. I do not recommend trying to do 2 studies at one time. It's possible, but 1 study at a time, this works just fine. Now the next step, we have to do the risk of bias assessment. So the first question of the AmStar 2.0 is essentially asking us, did the authors of this study explicitly state their population intervention, their PICO elements, essentially? So I've already done this assessment manually. The answer is a clear yes. They're very clear about specifying their PICO elements in this particular systematic review. And it's actually going to give you the PICO elements again. Given this information, this systematic review and meta-analysis in the document do include all the components of the PICO framework. Therefore, the assessment is yes. Now, again, I've quality controlled this extensively, so I know that's the correct answer, but you do need to double check every time. This goes into my blank document. And then last, again, the AmStar 2.0 has 16 domains, so I have to repeat this process another 15 times for the total of the 16 domains, right? And now moving on to the last step. Let's do this here. So what I will need is, all right. So I'm pasting the prompt. And then I will use the bullet point list that we generated in the previous step again. And now it's giving me a very nice summary paragraph that I can use in the results section of my report. It's giving me two summary paragraphs. I don't like this, but this happens when it doesn't have a lot of outputs to generate. If you're okay with the word limit, you can keep it here, or you can say, please condense into one paragraph. Nice to see it's actually giving me the risk ratios and confidence intervals and p-values and so on and so forth. So I can repeat this as many times as my included studies. And essentially my blank document now has a search strategy, justifications for my screening for all the studies that I screened, whether relevant or irrelevant. This is a lot better than a Prisma flowchart. And this will ultimately be a very big deal for reproducibility of systematic reviews. I have my data extraction table generated. I have my risk of bias assessment, which is always required. And I have my study summaries. Now I can begin the process of actually evaluating the data, interpreting the data, and doing what, at least for the time being, us humans can do, and AI is not that good at, which is interpreting and reaching conclusions. I think I am right on time with the 45 minutes. So that's it, guys. I hope.
I think I want to hear more. Is there any questions? Are there any questions? Yeah.
I can be the first. Wow, Teperikidis, it was Mr. Teperikidis was
Lefteris,
so,
please.
Doctor, it was so amazing to see your prompts and your process. And I have a question. I also wrote it in the chat. Did you try predefined Chat GPTs for, let's say, for the risk assessment bias? And if you did, why you didn't use it for processes that because it might save tokens?
Mm-hmm. Please, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Like to use GPTs to upload the rules of the that you need, and to do it from a predefined Chat GPTs, and not use like.
You mean like build those custom GPTs that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's completely doable, and I've actually done it. This is essentially what I'm trying to show is using the chat bot alone without having, if anyone that's ever tried to build a custom GPT, it's not as easy as it sounds. For the risk of bias assessment GPT, I think I have 7 different variations, and it just has to do with processing power and token limits. If you want to get into it, it's certainly doable. To me, it's more important to say, you know what, in the industry, we charge 1 hour, 1 billable hour for every report that we have to do a risk of bias assessment for. I can speak about this for hours. The most unreliable thing of a systematic review is the risk of bias assessment, simply because there is a lot of room for subjective opinions versus objective data. Anytime, and I've actually seen this in myself, I will do a risk of bias assessment on one report today and give it a score. If I do the same risk of bias assessment on the same study next week, depending on my mood and, you know, what other things I have going on, I may not even grade it the same way. And that is a clear indication of subjectiveness. Now, does Chat GPT not have subjective elements? Of course it does. The only difference is this is Chat GPT that has its own biases. And let's hypothetically say that as of tomorrow morning, all risk of bias assessments are performed by Chat GPT. well, then you have one output. We know the biases beforehand, so we can predict and account for the biases, versus every single systematic review, the risk of bias assessment was performed by a different human. So a different unique set of biases for each and every one of us. So ultimately, this is, to me, a better way of performing risk of bias assessments, but it still needs a lot of guidance, right? So to begin with, the guidance documents for the risk of bias tools are huge, especially if you're looking at the Cochrane tools. These guys like to write books, not just, reports. So you have to direct it to locate the instructions for domain 1 and only domain 1. You don't want it to get lost trying to figure out irrelevant information, or you can just locate it yourself and copy paste that instead of uploading a document. Nevertheless, ultimately, yes, it can be done with the chatbot. You can build a GPT. You can work with a developer to develop an application. I mean, there's other steps in the process. The first step of the process is one single individual user who's not a developer, doesn't know Python and all these languages. How can we use it to make our processes quicker? When the computer people come up with automations, then life is going to be even better, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aldo, can you stop sharing so we can see?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second, let me figure this out.
So Eyal wants to ask something.
Shalom, thank you
Shalom.
again. Very interesting. You do not use AI tools to perform the actual search. Is that because of the field you work in, or because you find they are still less effective than directly accessing searching the databases?
The web, very good question. First of all, thank you. The web browsing tools that these tools have, I am not very happy about. The only thing I'm going to say is that Chat GPT uses Bing. I am not a fan of Bing. It does give you some reliable results, but also, just to be on 100% clear, when performing a systematic review, if you do not directly search PubMed, you can't even publish. So I cannot even claim that I use the web browsing plugin of ChatGPT or any LLM really to search. I always have to claim PubMed, MACE, the Cochrane registry, these type of databases. It's not more than 5 or 6 databases. And honestly, we never even use those. You can easily do PubMed and you'll be just fine. Potentially in the future, yes. I mean, it's only a matter of time before the web browsing tools get better. I can see Google is already better, and you can input a question and it actually gives you answers versus, relevant web pages. So things are progressing, and the biggest thing to wait for right now is GPT-5, which is supposedly coming in the summer. Let's see, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yes, please, Dr. Rakefet.
So much. I'll start with the end. I'm just suggesting to the group leaders to maybe follow this with the workshop. It's always nice to watch, and then once you try to do the things yourself, it's complete. There's a big gap there. So I don't know if that's even possible, but that would be great. And could you define the biggest risk? Because each one of us knows examples, but what is the biggest risk of working with as of today?
First of all, there is a significant difference between the risks of today versus the risks 6 months ago. Things are noted better. Still, I think the biggest risk is the model going off on its own, trying to do what it describes as deducing, extrapolating, figuring out information. So one of the tasks that I would say I trust it completely to perform is the type of task that does not require anything other than either summarizing or restructuring my text. What I showed you with giving it an abstract and generating bullet points with the PICO elements out of it, this is just restructuring the information in an abstract. It's not really any type of information. It's not trying to identify anything. It's just taking a piece of text that is in an abstract format and it's converting it into a different format that I have pre-specified. I am not worried about this. What I'm worried about is when I send it out to look for any type of information, and especially when I know that that information may not be there. That to me is the biggest trap. Simply because I've actually heard an interview from, I can't remember his name, the CEO of Google, saying we do not know why AI hallucinates. And well, if these guys don't know, then, you know, that's certainly a problem. They have figured it out. In the last 6 months, I have noticed that where it would hallucinate, it now says the information was not available. So there are improvements from the computer people on the background, but still the biggest risk is it kind of defeats the purpose. But let's say the example I showed you about MACE and PPIs. There's going to be a risk ratio in my included studies. So if I ask it to read a PDF and give me the risk ratio of MACE for people that used PPIs versus, you know, whatever the control group was, I know that information is going to be there. But if I'm going to ask it the total number of patients in the included studies in a systematic review, I've done this enough times to know this is not always reported. So I'm always extra cautious. If I see a number that doesn't belong there, double check, right? If I see a number that could be the result of a hallucination, knowing, you know, the type of information I requested, go back and cross-check. And go back and cross-check everything, basically. But again, if you keep cross-checking the same thing over and over again, after a certain point, you're going to trust it enough and say, all right, you know what, I don't need to double-check this every time. And it's so many different types of tasks that, you know, I don't think anyone can begin to catalog them or list them. So it's just the best thing I can say. It's just a matter of experience and interacting with it yourself. So yes, a workshop would be a great idea.
We'll take it into account. Thanks. Hagit, please. You're muted, Hagit. We cannot hear you.
Okay, I hope I'll see the professor, the doctor. Thank you so much. It was amazing the way that you performed this session, and the way that you also gave the information in such a clear way for people that are not experts in meta-analysis. I have two questions. One is, it seems like that it becomes very sort of easy now to do it, easier than ever. Do you see that it's more, does it come in to be more popular? More meta-analysis are coming in than it used to be than in the past? And number one, and number two is there a really big important aspect of being a professional in the area that you are doing a meta-analysis, or it could be somebody that you're just hiring and doing it technically? Those two questions are connected, I guess.
Okay, so shall I start with first question or the second question? Okay, so essentially one thing I'm going to say, and Ronit and I had this exchange of emails because I always get these words wrong. I would not trust these models to perform a meta-analysis at the moment. Quantitative synthesis, I do not recommend. Qualitative synthesis, this is what I demonstrated. It works. Try next time you go log into Chat GPT, ask it what's 1 + 1. 5 out of 10 times it's going to get it wrong. It's not very good at math, let alone a meta-analysis, right? So I do not foresee the number of meta-analyses increasing in the near future because of AI. The number of meta-analyses is increasing in a crazy rate anyway, because a lot more people are learning how to perform a meta-analysis. But right now, these models are not very good at math. Don't know why, but still, like, I've actually had it perform a meta-analysis for me. It came close to what my team and I were actually calculating, but no, not at the moment. So I do expect a lot more regulations from the journals and rules and checklists that you have to fill out, declaring, like the use of AI and the type of tools that you used. And I do expect that there will be a huge burst of publications in general. It doesn't have to be a meta-analysis. It can be a review article. It can be a clinical study. It can be an experimental study. It can be anything really that you can use Chat GPT to help you with. So yes, I do expect the number of publications to increase if it's not already happening. And I'm sorry, please remind me of the second question.
About the professionality of how much do you need to be in the field when you do such a search?
I'm a pharmacist. I have no background in computers. The beauty of this is that you do not need to have a technical background to use these models. Yes, I have not slept for a very long time because I stay up late at night, every night, just to experiment. But I do not know computers. If you ask me about code and things like that, no, not familiar.
But you did know very well the terms of what you need as a pharmacist. So as a pharmacist, you say you must be a professional in your field in order to do such a search.
I would highly recommend it, because you need to be able to evaluate what the text that is being generated, is it valid? Is it reliable? I mean, people like me have been doing this for like 20 years now. If one word is off, I'll suspect something. But my work involves working from home, 10 to maybe 12 hours every day, working on systematic reviews. That's what I do every day, all day. So having someone with my background, I would highly recommend. If that person is not available, take one extra step to cross-check the information that you get. It might be more time consuming, but still it's the most important thing, because you need to make sure it's reliable information. And again, I know I don't want to tire you guys by saying this over and over again, but I can't stress how important it is. After you perform a specific task 10 times and you've cross-checked 10 times and it was correct 10 times, then the 11th time you can say, all right, you know what, I trust this enough. I don't have to do it, the cross-checking anymore. You know what I mean? So.
Okay.
Thanks. Liron?
Yes, I wanted to say that it was very interesting. I like that you have a system, because what I'm doing also, I have a system, because what I found is that if you have a system, then you can create much better results. So I liked it. And so thank you for that. And one more thing is that I've learned from my experience, there's a tool that's called Party Rock, that you can create your own app. So did you try it?
There's several of these. I can't remember the name of the one that I was using.
Did you try to do it to connect to PubMed?
No, I was actually
because
trying.
I did it, and it was very interesting, the results.
I'm dying to hear.
So what I did, I'm coming from the supplements industry and from the plant industry. So I asked for any indication if it can give me any research that's been connected to it, and if it can recommend on any nutraceutical that was experienced, like in the research, there's a background, and if it could show me the articles. So it gives the results, back to anyone who says the indication.
Okay.
If you write it down, the indication headache, it will write for you the articles that you can link to in PubMed, and which supplements a list of supplements that you can take. And it was very simple. I cannot create an app, really. It's not me. I'm not. And it was very easy. So I think if you have a system, it would be very easier for you to do it. You can repeat it and see that it's okay. I'm not sure it's perfect. But it's very interesting that you can do it by yourself, create your own app very easily, and so try it.
Can you write down the name of
Party Rock? Yeah, I can write Party Rock. Yeah.
I have two things to say about this. First of all, in terms of building your own application, I am bound by a few non-disclosure agreements, but all I'm going to say is that there's going to be some very, very interesting tools coming out in the very near future. I'm not saying that, people should not play around with building your own application and things like that, but I know some very heavy duty players are involved, so I am expecting some really interesting tools. The second thing I'm going to say is, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the website I was using. To me, it's interesting. It's the basic concept of science. Before you execute an experiment, you write a protocol, right? Even if you're in the laboratory or in the clinical field or secondary research like I'm doing, you define the steps. And that's for the purposes of reproducibility and so on and so forth. So having a method that obviously can then be used to build your own application is vital. Before you even begin to write the first prompt, come up with a strategy. What is the number of tasks that have to be performed? How many of these can be performed in one interaction? How many do I have to break down into multiple interactions? Once you have your strategy, then you can either execute it in the chatbot, build an application, work with a developer and build a more professional application, and so on and so forth. But the common denominator is having your methodology. So if anything, that is the best way to set something like this up, I guess.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, maybe we have a little bit more time. So if there is something that you can add so we can learn more, we'll be happy.
All right, so let's say let's make a statement. What should we say? Let's say immune checkpoint inhibitors are effective in, let me not write the whole thing, NSCLC. All right. Now, again, I am giving it the context. So I'm saying it's a statement in an academic manuscript. I am asking it for highly impactful. Seminal studies is another word for impactful. I actually have a list of over 50 synonyms that you can use for this to support the following statement. Then you give the statement, then you move on into rules. Now, you must use your training data to identify the requested citations. you must not generate hypothetical or illustrative citations. Now, again, the words I am using come from my experience with the tool. So every time it would hallucinate on me and give me a study that looked real, but when you drop it into PubMed, it's just not there because it's fake. I would come back to it and say, well, why did you give me this fake citation? And it would say, well, this was an illustrative citation. So what it said to me, I am now taking and creating a rule out of it. And I'm saying, I don't want illustrations, hypothetical citations, and so on and so forth. And then the other thing I'm going to request is, please prioritize accuracy when, well, prioritize accuracy when generating the citation list. It has a tendency to make mistakes when generating citations. So it will give you a citation, the title will be correct, but the list of authors will be wrong, or the authors will be correct, but something else will be wrong. So ultimately, asking it, sometimes it still makes mistakes, but it's actually much better when you give it this particular rule. So now it's giving me a study that I actually know about, 2015. This is perfect. Let's just make sure. And we'll use Bing for this. Come on. Right, so it's saying Borgay is the author. So you can see the study is perfectly legitimate. You can go to this one. I'm not sure I know about the study, but again, it's a little biased in the sense that it will give you studies from the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet and the BMJ and all the highly reputable journals. But if such studies exist, in all honesty, and I was doing this manually, I would still pretty much be doing the same. So this is Brahmer. Well, there he is. So these are perfectly fine, good citations. The way I like to do this is provide it with a statement to support in the context of academic manuscript writing, or something that can be used as a citation. You can try a different approach and say, give me citations on checkpoint inhibitors and non-small cell lung cancer or whatever. That could also work, but I've used this a lot of times, and you saw I went into it, I was confident that I was going to get real citations because I've done this a million times. The only way you're not going to get good references out of this is if there are no good references out of this. So if nothing is out there, it may tell you that I don't have such information, or it may start giving you like some stories that it comes up with. It's going to look like not necessarily a hallucination, but it's going to look like something is awkward, versus just going straight into giving you a citation list. So this little guy here can work wonders. Feel free to try it out, and I'll put it in the chat. Adjust it any way you want. And that's it. I mean, again, the story behind one of the publications I showed earlier is that there was a major pharmaceutical company that approached the professor of pharmacology I spoke to you about setting up 2 PhD positions at the medical school here related to artificial intelligence and pharmacovigilance. And I got the call because I'm obviously more familiar than George is on the topic. And he told me, listen, just up to you, develop a process and let's publish it. We need publications on the topic because, so what I did was essentially use the methodology that I just showed you here I just applied it in a different field. So most of what I did was based on the principles of this. And I will stress that what I just showed you is not just applicable to systematic reviews. You can do it for any other, you can use the search string generation strategy for any type of search you want to do for PubMed, whether it is you're doing a systematic review or you're just looking for information on for any type of project you're working on. The screening thing can still work. You don't have to be systematic about it. So using this method, obviously it's not perfect. Obviously it requires a lot of improvement still, and it can still always get better. There is no such thing in my book as a perfect prompt. But still, it's a good starting point, I guess.
Yes, it is. You didn't. You said you're going to paste it in the chat.
It's in the chat.
I cannot see it.
I'll paste it again, but I actually see it.
Oh, maybe I cannot see it.
I see some Hebrew but that
Yeah.
came up after it.
Ah. Okay, thank you. Now I see it.
All right, cool.
Yeah, thank you. So really, it was such a useful and valuable lecture. I cannot thank you enough for your time and professionality. And I'm sure we'll meet again because people will want to have a workshop, and if you'll be willing to do it, so we will be very happy.
I'll be happy to see you guys again.
Yes, it's exactly the type. I'm also saying for the sake of people that will watch it after in the YouTube, it's exactly the lectures that we're looking for, that are precise and very helpful for understanding the methods and the practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night. Thank you for having me.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.